Genshin Impact is a game that has a lot of controversies tied to it, many of which are related to discussions about diversity and representation. How important is representation and diversity? How does a writer or artist go about it? What even constitutes good or bad representation/diversity? These are topics circulated in the Genshin Impact sphere, but a large portion of the fandom seems hesitant to talk about it. Many argue that it's just an anime game, and not to think too hard about it, or that Genshin, being a fantasy anime gacha game, excuses aspects of its writing. I disagree with this. It's important to talk about our media with a critical lens, so I wanted to properly analyze Genshin and look at its portrayal of certain groups. Now, to make myself perfectly clear, I am not here to talk about the debates over ethnic representation in Genshin. I'm not a part of the ethnicities mentioned in the discussion, and I haven't done much research on it, so I do not wish to add any more misinformation to the already heaping pile of it. But I am here to talk about the female characters in Genshin, how they are written, and their lore. Online, there have been more and more people who are critical of how women in Genshin are portrayed, arguing they aren't utilized as much as the men, there are demeaning traits to their characters, and their personalities are too similar to each other. As a huge fan of Genshin, a woman, and an artist, I wanted to throw my hat into the ring. I believe that a lot of criticism towards Genshin lacks depth, being flimsy and structured based on a lack of information or preconceived biases against the game. These opinions are unhelpful and quite weak when put up against what's actually shown in game. I, as a woman, also find it a bit odd that the majority of people talking about strong female characters and how to write them are men, which doesn't necessarily undermine their opinions. I've watched many of those videos and agree with a lot of their points, but I also find the lack of female voices is a missed opportunity for different views on the topic, and just strange in general when remembering what we are talking about. And finally, it's also important to analyze the artistic intent behind these characters, because understanding all the little nuances, or at least being aware of them, helps with seeing what makes up good writing. Genshin Impact is art, and as artwork it can be analyzed to see what is good or bad, but art is also subjective, and this art is made to be sold to consumers, so taking those facts into account is critical as well. Overall, I just don't think this topic is being covered with as much care as it needs to be, and it's beneficial to take an analytical lens to media you like. So, in this video I want to explore the question, are women in Genshin Impact written well? But before I set the stage for this video, I would just like to quickly announce that I have a Tumblr now. I'll probably post video updates, behind the scenes stuff, art, commentary on fandom drama, and more things I haven't made a concrete plan for. Anyways, feel free to check it out if you'd like. My username is Ellie-Remine. I think we'll have fun over there. And sorry for this clunky self-promotion, I've never done this before. Back to the video. Okay, to set the ground rules. 1. I'm not going to cover every single character, because A, that will take forever, and B, there are certain characters that I want to focus on more than others. They are usually brought up as criticism, so I believe going in depth on them is crucial. 2. I'm going to cover notable NPCs that appeared in world quests, but I'm not going to cover anyone who is only mentioned in lore. Think artifacts, books, and Tevat's past in general. The lore girlies don't necessarily count when talking about story quality, and while I would love to talk about future Archons and Harbingers, we simply don't know enough about them. 3. This video is going to contain major spoilers for basically the entire game up to 3.7, so please be aware of that. I'm assuming that you finished all the Archon quests and have played these other quests that are on screen. I highly recommend finishing those to get the most out of this video. By playing these, you should also be informed on the sensitive content present. Finally, my interpretations and opinions on Genshin's writing are all my own. I've tried my best to make it clear when I'm talking about my own thoughts and what actually appears in game. I'm not expecting everyone to agree with me. We all have our own unique view of the world, and that's okay. Please feel free to leave your own thoughts on these characters in the comments. I love reading that kind of stuff. Whew. Okay, now that everything has been set up, let's talk about the trio of Jean, Keqing, and Ganyu. These three are frequently used as jokes relating to the rinse and repeat characterization that I mentioned before. There have been many people pointing out that they're weirdly similar to each other. All of them are overworked but highly competent individuals who work for their nation's respective governments. They refuse to take breaks and end up making things worse for their physical and mental health. I won't deny it, they are similar. But I would argue that these characters are in fact distinct from each other. Let's look at the trait of overworked first. All three are very dedicated to their jobs and their roles as high-ranking high-ranking political leaders make them demanding as is. But because they are so dedicated, they take on more work than they can realistically manage, and don't realize that what they're doing is a bad idea. They're willing to suffer because their jobs are of utmost importance. Almost all of those can be found in them, but the trait manifests itself in different ways. Take Jean, for instance. As the acting Grand Master, she has giant shoes to fill in wake of Grandmaster Varka's absence, especially in the eyes of the public. Jean looks up to the famous Mondstadt hero Vanessa. She didn't think she deserved the title of the Dandelion Knight or the Lion Fang Knight until the events of her story quest. In it, she learned to accept her title as a Dandelion Knight, while also acknowledging she does not represent the past, but the present and future of Mondstadt. It's only a bit of development, but it's nice for a less important character like Jean. She overworks herself because she wants to feel worthy of the high position she was granted, and live up to Varka and her hero. She's realizing she has earned it. Keqing, though, is much more sure of herself. The moment we met her, you could tell that she's confident in her abilities. This confidence is only further proven with her skeptic attitude. She talked back to Morax at the rite of descension and actively tried to destroy her vision. Keqing is a very strong and independent person, but Keqing is also able to be humbled, like finally recognizing all the work Morax did for Liyue after he was gone. So she takes on a lot of work. Keqing is the future of Liyue. It's found throughout most stories related to her. She wants to make sure her nation is strong without the help of Rex Lapis or the Adepti, so she works hard every single day to make that dream come true. In the 2022 Lantern Rite, she learned that it's okay to rely on others. Keqing's motivation of proving herself is a lot less personal. She does face pressure from others, but it's not a big part of her inner conflicts. She wants to prove to the Divine that humanity is strong on its own, which makes another character to feel one of the game's motifs, humanity becoming the king of kings. Notice how in Keqing and Jean's stories, they both focus on proving themselves to a group. Ganyu really doesn't have that, at least not to their extent. Her story is about her heritage and the sense of duty to both Morax and Liyue Harbor. She's half human and half Qilin, so she feels she does not fit in anywhere. She lies about her Adeptite side to humans, and tries to strip her more human qualities during her Adeptite training. Ganyu is a person wrapped up in insecurities about her identity. She's felt trapped between two worlds for a long time now, which is why she places great importance on the contract she made with Morax. It even is the reason she got her vision. She wants to help the people of Liyue to the best of her ability. It's a clear goal. It's why she works and sleeps so much too. She's always working to meet the requirements of that contract. Ganyu's story is about her realizing that she can be both human and Qilin at the same time, and her signing the contract was her already coming to terms with that answer. She just doesn't fully grasp that yet. Ganyu doesn't need to be a perfect human or Adepti. She just needs to be herself. I don't think these characters are poorly written. The opposite, actually. The overlapping character motivations happened because they play similar roles in their nations, which is forgivable. But I don't think it's all good though. I'm quite iffy on Ganyu. The main issue I have with her is how the game discusses her insecurities about her weight. I'm not going to defend it at all. It's bad. Really uncomfortable and unnecessary. Like, I know I just established she's insecure, but it all sounds like an excuse for an in-game model because they didn't feel like editing it. It's all weird and bad. I also wish these characters were explored more in quests, so more players can learn about them. I'm sure their hardcore fans would appreciate it. Regardless, I do think they were all fairly well thought out, and I hope the fanbase comes to recognize them for their best qualities. Related to the previous critique, there's a number of fans who find the characterization for 4 stars and some 5 stars who aren't relevant to the main plot to be lacking. I understand why this is brought up often, and I believe it's valid criticism to a degree. A huge problem with these girls is that a lot of their traits exist for marketing. While making characters, I get the feeling Hoyoverse wanted to make them as appealing to general audiences as possible. Genshin is a beginner gacha game, after all. So having friendly female characters to market is smart for attracting newcomers. That can also be drawn from male gaze anime art on Pixiv, a win-win for the company. Well, I think MiHoYo has learned from its mistakes. For some time in Genshin, there were many kind, amicable personalities for non-important female characters. This doesn't mean those made in that era automatically don't have any depth. Take Sucrose, for example. For the longest time, I did not like her. Her social anxiety didn't feel realistic to me, at all, so I took no interest in her, even with her sad backstory and weird experiments. But during the 3.5 Windbloom event, I started to vibe with what the writers were doing with her. She actually had a chance to explain her thought processes and the real struggles of socially anxious people. Pairing Sucrose and Kale was inspired, and I hope we see more moments where characters can interact without the Traveler being present in the future. I had similar thoughts about Nilou as I did Sucrose. When I first saw her, I thought her art kid thing was cute, and that was about it. But the more you think, she does become more interesting. Nilo really is a regular person who has a good support system and is able to pursue her passion, to an extent. Nilou's participation in the mission to save Nahida was courageous. Her art had been frowned upon for so long, and she then used it to save all of Sumeru. It shows her compassionate nature well. Unlike her story quest, which did her extremely dirty. Side tangent, her story quest is the only one I didn't like. It falls into the NPC main character problem a lot of the other story quests do, and it makes me upset because honestly the story is very sweet and uplifting. It showed how supportive the Grand Bazaar community is of each other, and that she is willing to go directly against the academia. This all being set up for her role in Chapter 5, but of course it focused on an NPC and her garbage dad. It would have been better if the garbage dad was Nilou's dad, because then Nilou would have a reason for why she's involved in her own story quest, and it would have set up the community plot point better. Regardless, I think Nilou is a nice addition to the cast, but her design leaves much to be desired. Moving on. The worst cases of this archetype are found within 4 stars. The team really does not know what to do with them, and it shows. Barbara has some interesting idol culture commentary attached to her, and I like that she has self-confidence issues, because she always felt inferior to Jean. But they don't do anything with her. We haven't seen her in an event in ages, and her stories and hangout events are all we have to go off of. It's frustrating to admit, but yeah, they forgot about her. Noelle, another Mondstadt sweetie, is in the same boat. She's cute, hardworking, and her lack of self-preservation is a logical trait to add for who she is, but there hasn't been much exploration of her outside of her hangout. It's too bad we haven't seen more of her as of late. Though to play devil's advocate, simple people in a game like Genshin Impact is also extremely beneficial. With so many characters that have centuries worth of trauma, uncomplicated ones keep the world grounded. Some people lead simple, happy lives, and that's normal. It all ties into the game's main themes of fate and destiny. Some don't have a grand purpose. So while I think we are past this particular era in Genshin writing, I don't believe it was all for nothing. With all that being said, there are many underappreciated women in this game, and I'm here to change that. Parts of the fandom consider these characters to be simple, or as far as unmemorable, but I strongly disagree with those sentiments, because the writers did a good job with them and I want to dedicate time to their efforts. I don't really think one is more neglected than the other, so this section will be in a numbered list that's not necessarily ranked. Ayaka is the first that comes to mind when I hear the words, "done dirty by the fandom." While she is not my absolute favorite, I've come to like her, more than I thought I would. There's something so tragic about a child growing up too fast. They have to take on responsibilities they most likely didn't even want or thought about before, but in order to survive they have to. What makes Ayaka's situation even worse is that she took the role as the public figure, so she never got the chance to make any friends outside of the Kamisato clan. Being a normal girl, the one thing that's out of her grasp as a princess. Even in her story quest where she was attempting normalcy, she was treated differently. Ayaka parallels a lot of fairy tales / myths about female royalty or just women in general. Not only is it an important connection for her to have as a character in Genshin Impact, it also highlights the tragedy of mythological / fantasy women who were often left behind. Her smile is a sad one, but whenever we see her again, I feel her breaking out of her shell, with the support of her loved ones. All this is the reason why the fandom consensus makes me so mad. Y'all, she's not obsessed with the Traveler. She probably has a little crush, but that's normal for this game. The Traveler is canonically a world hero, who wouldn't? But more importantly, they are a genuine friend for her. That means a lot for Ayaka, and that's weirdly forgotten. Ayaka is a complicated person, and her kindness despite her position speaks volumes. Kamisato Ayaka deserves better, and I will say that until the end of time. Okay, so I know this is a hot take, but I'm also right, so let me explain. I feel that people forget Paimon is mentally like 8-9 years old. She's a child. She's supposed to and should be an annoying little shit. But writing annoying characters comes with its own challenges. Because while realistic, an audience likely won't enjoy a single second of their screen time if the writers aren't careful. so it's a hard balance to achieve. They should be annoying, but not to the audience. This is where Genshin is most inconsistent. Paimon is annoying to the general player base, and that's a big problem. She's playing two major roles: relaying simplified information to the player to make sure they understand what the hell is going on, and playing an actual role in the story. Her character doesn't get a chance to shine because she's playing the former so often, while delivering unfunny dialogue to boot. Which is unfortunate because in reality, she's a very flawed but interesting person. She's gluttonous, positive, annoying, sometimes emotionally wise, greedy, loyal, socially unaware, but kind to a fault and full of love. Paimon is akin to an annoying little sister, who we wish would shut up, but would be sad to see her go. Her separation anxiety is not only a realistic trait for her to have, it also gives some potential lore insight. Her airhead nature is also very realistic for a child. On Twitter, I saw a couple of people who were peeved by a weird comment Paimon made about Jet's skin getting darker to Jet's face. They used it to further fuel their dislike of Paimon. Personally, I read the situation as a child making an honest, in-the-moment observation than it actually being meant as an insult. People are forgetting how honest and unintentionally rude kids can be. That is so on brand for Paimon, and while it was wrong of her to say that, she was corrected by the Traveler, and Jet didn't seem to be too offended by it. So as all of you were already aware, there's mixed opinions on how Paimon is written. It's been present in the community ever since the game came out, really. But as of recently, I'm noticing improvements in Paimon's writing, starting all the way back in 2.7. I liked seeing Paimon interact with Ito. It was super endearing. Multiple people told her to shut up in the Sumeru Archon quest, which is hilarious, while also showing the writing team has become more self-aware. Her separation anxiety was properly introduced in this year's Lantern Rite. In Baiju's story quest, she actually came up with a clever insult for Keqing. Being funny is an important trait for annoying characters, another good sign. I've got a hunch that they're finally figuring her out, and I couldn't be more happy, because players being invested in Paimon's emotions and well-being is very important to this story. I'm incredibly interested to see what they do with her in Fontaine. Yoimiya is an odd case, because before she came out, people were hoping for her to be the superior Amber, and then she wasn't as good as people were hoping her to be, and she was slowly forgotten. But that isn't fair, because she is a nice addition to the Genshin cast. Yoimiya is a genuinely caring, humble person who's dedicated to her craft. While there are other characters like this in Genshin, her way of going about things is quite praiseworthy. Yoimiya is a protector of children's dreams and innocence without being a maniac. She also contributed to the main Archon quest, so I'll say it again for the people in the back. She's incredibly brave for a regular-ass person that just so happens to have a vision. Yoimiya absolutely deserves to have a second story quest. Not only does it showcase her caring heart the best, it helped expand on her life philosophy, and is one of the best character story quests. I actually cared about the main NPC, Aveen. I thought that Paimon was significantly more well-behaved than in other quests, and Yoimiya is just a lovely person to hang out with. A nice palate cleanser after the quirky characters that showed up in 3.6, that I love but can't tolerate forever. I was smiling through the entire animated cutscene. The quest was beautiful and exactly what 3.7 needed. I have many strong feelings about Genshin women, and most of the time I believe they don't get the credit they deserve. I unfortunately had to cut multiple girls from this section and others because there are just so many. I wish I could talk about them, but I also value my sanity. I adore most of these characters. Most being the word to focus on. Since you're a Genshin fan, you're well aware that nothing is perfect. So let's get into the characters some are on board with. There are some Genshin girls that the fandom has complicated feelings for, or simply don't like. While most are just unpopular, I'm specifically talking about characters that parts of the fanbase aren't keen towards. This has happened for a couple reasons. They don't like how she is portrayed, or she is generally an awful person. So I'm going to analyze why they're so controversial, explain if I think the characters deserve the hate or not, and add my own personal thoughts on how well the writing works sprinkled throughout. This section will also be in an ordered list that isn't ranked. So, to start off, let's cover our favorite Jinny. Liloupar is a complicated figure in the Genshin fanbase, meaning that she is a total jackass and people are confused about what to think of her. Their reasoning makes complete sense. In the World Quest series, Dirge of Bilkis. She says things to Jet and Babel that have been described as competitive racism, which is a scarily accurate way of explaining her behavior. But Liloupar likes the traveler because of reasons, so they soul bonded, and she is necessary for the plan we were helping Jet with, so we had to be with her. She kept on being an asshole to Jet and Babel to the point where even the traveler and Paimon were sick of her shit. But again, to clarify, she is unfortunately helpful. This is absolutely purposeful on the writer's part. We're supposed to be frustrated with her, but we understand why she is there and that she's an actual asset. But as the world quest went on, we slowly learned about Liloupar and the thought process behind her actions. She was once married to the king of Gurabad, who she thought would end slavery, but he never had the intention of doing so. The Jinn felt love deeply and valued their freedom, so that betrayal cut deep. In response, Liloupar started a multi-generational scheme to take her husband down, and the city of Gurabad along with him. Once her plan had concluded, she had killed all 300 of her children, her husband, and the entire city, including the people she once pitied. King Deshret found out about her, killing thousands of people, and was infuriated, so he fragmented her consciousness and scattered those pieces across the desert. This backstory does help explain why she said the things she did. All she has seen from the desert people was slavery. The rich used slaves, and once those slaves were free, the population then made amalgamate Jinn to do their work. You can understand why she came to the conclusions she did, but yeah, her prejudice against the Jinni is based on the ancient people and only like one singular experience. It's then clearly laid out that Liloupar is a bad yet nuanced person. Her past betrayal also does shed light on what she was saying to Jet. Throughout the quest, Liloupar, in her own misguided way, attempted to give advice to Jet based on her own experiences with being betrayed. At the end of Dirge of Bilkis, where she tells the traveler that Jet is a good kid, it recontextualizes the events of the quest and helps show her own character development of beginning to overcome her biases. With the help of Jet, she finally faced the sins of her past. She's currently gone, yet still has the potential of coming back, which is very odd because it begs the question, what else are they planning to do with her? If you think about it, what other roles can she have? All of this to say, I understand why she's not well liked compared to other NPCs. She's a complete douchebag for 70% of her screen time, and the other 30% is subtly explaining how she was even more of a traumatized douchebag thousands of years ago. Only at the last possible minute does she actually start a redemption arc, but Semi dies before she gets the chance to complete it, which is a writing choice I would defend. I mean, I don't get the vibe that she was supposed to be redeemed in the quest itself. It was the moment of a woman who accepted her fate and the consequences of her actions. So yeah, I'm okay with Liloupar's existence. Though being with her was not pleasant, at least her inanimate body is of some use. Yae Miko, Raiden A's familiar and priestess of the Grand Narukami Shrine. You either love her or hate her. There's a subset of the fandom who don't like her because of her personality and or the shit she pulls with other people. So, let's explore the unique facets to her character and see what's got people up in arms. Miko fits the archetype of a trickster kitsune, but two notable differences are that she actively helped humanity and is recognized as a yokai. Many kitsune stories involve them fully disguising themselves as human, and with tricksters, the benefits humanity sees from their actions are non-existent. Miko going out of her way to save Inazuma from A's self-destructive tendencies, and in her story quest only taking action after she lost money, is a good show of her moral compass. Miko also enjoyed the benefits she gained. She has also low-key manipulated people to get what she wants, which happened during the Inazuma Archon quest. But in the end, she did all of that for a good cause, and has helped without manipulating people. She knows when to step in and how to get what she wants, which leads to her inconsistent methods. This could lead to the fans of the people she manipulated to dislike her. I don't know. Yae Miko's past does corroborate her present-day behavior, though. For a person who lost so many loved ones during the cataclysm, just like A, she was the one who handled it in a mature way. She was able to accept that they were dead, able to move forward, but still kept those people in her heart. That was a lesson A had to learn, but Miko didn't even need to. She did a long time ago. It implies a level of maturity that is not often seen from her, that is really respectable, and shows why A put so much trust in her. So Miko isn't all deceit. She does have a heart, but just for those she cares for. Though there's still the elephant in the room that is Miko's teasing. While most of her teasing is just in good fun, I saw that quite a few fans feel uncomfortable with how she talks to Goro in particular. They argued that this teasing is borderline/is harassment, which, yeah, I don't like it either. Like, it was kind of funny the first time because of the whole Miss Hina thing, and that in her voice line she was using his tail as a way to brag about her own, but the bit was never funny again. Just leave him alone. How funny can the same reaction be over and over again all the time? especially to an audience. It's gonna get old sooner or later. It should have been a one and done comment, because then the fandom can make their own lore about it and stuff for likes on Twitter. These two's interactions are handled in an unnerving manner, and I hope we don't see more of it because man is it not funny. Anyways, I understand why the fandom's opinion on her is mixed. She's a morally ambiguous character, and not everyone likes a specific kind of morally gray that Yae Miko is, though she's fairly complex and possesses a lot of good qualities as well. All in all, it depends on how much you enjoy evil-ish characters. Dori is the weirdest character in this entire fucking game, both in-game and not. Dori is an anomaly, so out of left field, I struggle to properly express what's so wrong with her while remaining comprehensible. She's clearly a stereotype, but her backstory suggests a sympathetic reason as to why she became like this. But it's in her vision story, and the rest of them barely do any fleshing out except the message, "She likes money, beaten over your head 30 times. In her voice lines, she genuinely respects Kaveh, but she has put Kaveh into serious debt for a palace he does not even own. You see, Dori is so bizarre, filled to the brim with contradictions, and I just had to talk about her. First, I want to cover her backstory, because I think it's the only slightly redeemable part of her. Dori had an older sister who fell ill, to the point she was coughing up blood. The medicine she needed cost tens of millions of mora, but their family was already poor, so in the moment of discovering those costs, she decided to make so much mora, her family will never have to suffer this kind of pain again. She was so paranoid of losing what she had gained, she had insomnia over it, to the point only the comfort of her current wealth can put her to sleep. Dori lives in a constant predator versus prey world. If she doesn't get as much money as possible, she might lose it all. At the end of the day, she has fallen into greed and now feels more comfortable with taking advantage of others in order to stay at the top of the food chain. The story of Sumeru heavily focuses on the fact that the systematic racism against the desert people fueled by the corrupt government was bad, and that the morally reprehensible behavior the Eremites participated in was because they just wanted to survive. Their circumstances weren't their fault to begin with. Dori's story does help make this corrupt government seem more plausible, because there are people in the rainforest who aren't geniuses or as educated as those in the academia. Scholars are the favored demographic of the sages, so they're the ones who are rich and have access to better opportunities. It shows how flawed certain worldviews are, like Al-Haytham's, for example. He was privileged enough to be born into a family of scholars, and lives a simple life compared to those who struggle to make ends meet. Basically, I acknowledge that her backstory makes her presence in this world slightly more tolerable than it would have been without it. Emphasis on slightly. Dori is still a huge bitch. She's a capitalist villain that isn't an antagonist, so we have to deal with her shit. Like, for the sliver of empathy she has for her family, her Jinni, and sumpter beasts, she still manages to be a complete menace, derogatory, to the people around her. I'm convinced that somebody at Hoyoverse realized last minute that Dori was just a plot device, panicked, and wrote her vision story. That's the only person who actually cared enough to check, I swear to God. And that's the last time anyone cared, because she's never that relevant after her appearance in the Our Conquest. Dori is my least favorite character, and I think that it would be best for the game to just abandon her completely after the Sumeru updates are over. Nobody will miss her, I can guarantee that. For all of these women, I understand why there's controversy surrounding them, and I even agree with some of the points brought up against their characters, mainly Dori. But I also believe that there's a similar problem of people not actually going in to analyze what the intention behind these characters were. Being sort of unlikable was the point, and for that the writers did their job. Whether they carried it out tastefully or not is up to further readings of their dialogues and stories. Essentially, I think these problematic characters aren't as bad as they have been portrayed to be, unless they are Dori. But that doesn't mean criticisms should be dismissed. I couldn't think of a smooth transition into this part, but while writing I wished to end this video on a positive note, so I decided on talking about the universally recognized, well-written Genshin women. It's important for me to cover both the highs and lows of this game so I can paint a complete picture from my final thoughts. This section is not cleanly split up because I feel that what I will say probably has already been said before. I'd rather go with the flow and see how things work out. To start off, I'm going to analyze the beautiful mess that is Raiden A. I'm of the opinion that the Inazuma Archon quest was overall mediocre. I know this is a cold take, but it's also the truth. While I'm not going to talk about that whole debacle because it really deserves its own video, I'm here to talk about what is considered the best retroactive improvement of that Archon quest, A's second story quest. This quest was really really good. It expanded on the grief that Ae experienced during the cataclysm, instead of glossing over it in a cutscene that only mentions the death of her twin sister Makoto. Ae lost her friends, the sister who she surrounded most of her life around, almost everyone she had ever loved, in a matter of what, days? That's heartbreaking, and in hindsight, her actions over the past 500 years become more human. Once we had explored her grief, she was able to face her past head-on. For 500 more years, she fought against the Shogun puppet, trying to prove she was ready for growth, and that her goal of eternity hasn't wavered, but the meaning of it has simply changed. There's so much strength behind that decision, physical and mental, and in the end, she was able to get closure by learning that Makoto is going to be at peace at last because of her growth, and finally getting the chance to say goodbye to Makoto. That's so beautifully poetic, and the freedom of Inazuma finally felt earned by the end of it. This character's journey was not a smooth one. Evidently. The first story quest, while intended to be set up for the closure of her arc, came off to players as a date more than anything, which is not good on Hoyoverse's part if the message was communicated that poorly. Everything more or less had to be fixed by that second story quest. That's not the cleanest writing, but I'm still glad the team learned from their mistakes and delivered a masterpiece. Through the mistakes of Inazuma, the developers took all of that to heart in order to tell amazing stories in Sumeru. Nahida is a prime example of that. This time, we actually got to see her character development in the Archon quest, and you can't help but root for her. She's a deeply insecure and traumatized child, but still incredibly kind and did everything in her power to help Sumeru while she was trapped. She's everything Sumeru needed in a leader, but was being held back by thinking she wasn't good enough and circumstances that were out of her control. Her story was surprisingly relatable. She may still be learning more about her emotions and what it means to be responsible for an entire nation, but that is to be expected. Her whole thing is being the small lord of Dendro, so constant growth is an important motif for her to have. Nahida has it all: a good character arc in the main story, 2 spectacular story quests, though her first one's a little better, and a lot of potential for the future of Genshin's main plot. Like I mentioned earlier, this improvement is seen in the other quests of Sumeru. The story of Jet was amazing, and it breaks my heart that we probably won't see her in a long time, or ever again after the Sumeru updates. The Golden Slumber and Dirge of Bilquis questlines were some of the best world quests to date. In the Golden Slumber, we met Jet and her father, Jabriel, and I really enjoyed the dynamic they had. Jet's character was also a pleasant change of pace compared to other NPCs we've met in the past. She's definitely kind, her teasing feels the most friendly, she's loyal, and has this carefree nature we do not see often. I became really attached to her and Jabriel, and when he died I felt her devastation. How she held everything together for a short time, and then fell apart. The Golden Slumber ended on a bitter note, but also helps set up the beginning of Dirge of Bilquis. We find Jet with a new maternal figure, Matriarch Babel, and a brother in Azariq. She never had a mother and just lost her father, so you're happy to see Jet with a new family and sense of purpose, which makes it all the more horrible when we learn that both Babel and Azariq planned to betray Jet. She killed for them, and they turned around and tried to kill the Traveler, her closest friend, and one of them even tried to marry her when she's an implied lesbian. The bitch. When she killed both of them, it was a victory. Jet was badass during those scenes. Like, look at this line. Iconic. But right after, there was a solemn mood. She never wanted it to come to this. And before the quest ended, she hugged the Traveler, said goodbye, and went out into the vast desert, not knowing where she was going to end up. Jet is now a leader of her own mercenary group, but I'm worried that this new family will also not end well, and maybe she will be the one to take the fall. Jet is the best NPC character I've seen for this game, and I hope we see her and more like her in the future. While we saw the tragedy of Jet unfold on screen, the backstory of Kali is just as impactful. Kali's debut was in the comic, which was used to introduce people to this world. Kali being a main character in promotional material is pretty significant. It shows the confidence they had in Kali as a character, and that effort has paid off. She's been through so much. She was experimented on, constantly running away from the Fatui and normal people out of fear, having the Archon residue sealed, and then having to deal with Elazar all over again. Kali has suffered so much, experiencing extreme pain over and over again to gain her freedom. But now in the present, she's doing so much better. She's met people that love and respect her, and is discovering her passions and sense of self through her new family. Along the way, she gained her wisdom through realizing that she can't dwell on the past forever, and the only way for her to heal is to keep moving forward. And honestly, Kali is a total badass. She has witnessed the worst of humanity and is still kind and gentle. I'm incredibly impressed, because personally, if I'd gone through all that, I would have given up on life and become a supervillain. From the bottom of my heart, I want to see good things happen to Kali. and I don't get the specific fuzzy feelings from seeing other characters quite like Kale gives me. That isn't to say I don't have soft spots for other characters. I just can't mention them here in a video that's almost 8,000 words long. Dia, La Senora, Jinha, Rosaria, Sorush, and Yelan are all girls I'm attached to the point of theming my phone around one. Real talent and passion has been put into Genshin Impact, and those who cannot see it are blind. There's so many beautiful stories in this game, and you don't have to go looking. They're right in front of you. To answer this video's main question right off the bat, I'd say yes. Genshin women are written well overall. For an anime gacha game, the writers went above and beyond to give them depth, personality, and genuine charm. Is it perfect? No. Definitely not. Some are one note compared to others, and that's to be expected. I think a big problem with this game is that the cast is huge, and is only going to get bigger. There will be characters who are going to be cast aside for newer ones, and some will not be all too complicated in the first place. For clarification's sake, I'm talking about both Genshin men and women. There are simplistic characters in them both, and that's a positive and a flaw, because those unembellished characters keep the world from being too edgy, but in turn don't show the full capabilities of the writers. There's other various problems with how this game presents women at times. The outfit designs are hit or miss, and God is Ganyu's weight thing so unnecessary. But these instances are not common. I'm certain most of the analysis I did was on intended subtext and connections they wanted the audience to make. So yeah, that was my very passionate defense of Genshin writing, at least a portion of it. Since you've watched this entire video, you've probably guessed that I'm confident in most of my takes, but I may have been a tad too generous with my interpretations for the controversial or less popular girls, so I'm curious to see what other fans think about them. I'm still debating whether or not I'll make a direct sequel to this video. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to talk about the rest of the cast and Fontaine when they come out, but I believe that may be repetitive, so I'll most likely delve into other parts of Genshin writing, like story quests, events, and videos on individual characters like the Harbingers or future Archons. I don't think a lot of fans delve into the artistic talent behind Genshin's storytelling past all the hype and lore sometimes, so I hope I did these girls justice. Anyways, that's enough of my rambling. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please feel free to check out my Tumblr if you would like. Have a great rest of your day, and happy wishing! Bye!